Hello and welcome to Flip Video 30. We're going to talk about the atomic bomb and the war at home. So the atomic bomb is the result of the Manhattan Project, which actually happened in Tennessee, and we're going to look at that in our next Flip video. But let's talk about what happened with the bomb. So in the 1930s, scientists discovered how to split the nuclei of certain elements. All right, and so this resulted in nuclear fission and released tremendous energy. Okay, so it's like huge. And so they also figured out how to use this process with uranium. And so Albert Einstein wrote Roosevelt and told him the US needed to use this technology to make the atom bomb. All right, and so the U.S. began the Manhattan Project to build the bomb. On July 16th, 1945, the first bomb was tested in Alamogordo, New Mexico. All right, so Albert Einstein was the guy behind the numbers for the atom bomb. Okay, so as you learned in your World War II Who's Who project, your mixer, there was a couple people that were responsible for creating the bomb. Albert Einstein figured out the math that made the bomb possible. And he wrote Roosevelt and said, look, this is a bad war. If you know, Albert Einstein's a Jew, okay? He says, you need to figure out how to make a bomb out of this. And so the U.S. began the Manhattan Project. And it was this really super top secret project that we're going to go into a little bit later. But a couple things that you want to look at here. Is so secret. If you guys are familiar with the monkeys, the three monkeys, it's right here. See no evil, hear no evil, say no evil. So what you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, let it stay here. Okay, so it's very much don't talk to anybody about what you're doing. So President Truman drops the bombs. So Roosevelt, while he was okay with creating it, he never really got the guts to do it because he knew through all of the testing exactly how destructive these bombs are going to be. So he really did not want to have to drop that bomb. And so he passed away in April of 1945. And the decision to drop the bomb ended up falling to President Truman. And he really didn't have as many qualms. So Truman knew that there would be high civilian deaths. He knew that wherever he put these bombs, it was going to be really, really bad. But he also knew that the Axis powers were not far from making their own bombs. So he knew that we weren't the only ones that knew how to do this, that we weren't the only ones with the technology. And we're going to see the results of that in the Cold War because Soviet Union and China end up having this technology. Okay, and so he's like, look, I'm going to prioritize saving American lives over the loss of Japanese lives. He's like, I'm going to have to make an executive decision here, one that's not easy. I'm going to have to decide that American lives are way more important than those of the Japanese. So on August 6th, 1945, the U.S. dropped the bomb in Hiroshima. And within 2 minutes, 60,000 of Hiroshima's 344,000 residents were either dead or missing. Okay, guys, that's just within the first 2 minutes. Okay, the destruction went much further than that later on. Okay, on August 9th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, and the U.S. dropped the bomb on Nagasaki. This bomb killed 35,000, okay, within the first couple of minutes. And on August 15th, Emperor Hirohito surrendered. Here's something to pay attention to, though. Okay, so let's do the math. August 6th is when the bomb was first dropped, right? So there's 60,000 within 2 minutes. August 9th, 3 days later, we drop another bomb. There's 35,000. So what is that? 95,000 of his people were dead within the first 2 minutes of these two bombs. That's not counting the rest of the people that died. When did he finally surrender? On the 15th. Guys, it took over a week for the emperor to go, okay, we need to surrender before they drop another bomb. Okay, this has got to be so terrifying for the Japanese people. But it also goes to show you the Japanese culture. there's a lot of pride in their culture, and failure is something that is not very well accepted. Even today, it's not very well accepted. So for him to go and say, I have to surrender this big war that we've been fighting, it was a big decision that took him a while to do. Part of this flip video is you're going to watch this atomic bombing of Nagasaki, so you're going to see a little bit more about it. All right, so the war in Europe has ended. So by January 1945, the Soviet army reached Berlin. Okay, so we talked about in the last flip video how it shrunk. All right, everything kind of shrunk in. So in April, Benito Mussolini was captured and executed, and the U.S. forces passed through Italy and reached Berlin. Berlin is now surrounded, all right? Hitler is a physical and emotional wreck, okay? He's a drug addict. Not largely talked about, but he's a drug addict. He has some unknown illnesses. We do believe that it is intestinal illnesses. So he is falling apart. He's shaking with tremors and he's paranoid with drugs. And so on April 30th, Hitler and several of his associates committed suicide. Okay, this is the known fact of how the war ended. Okay, this is the historically recognized. Now, I know there's a lot of theories out there about maybe he didn't kill himself, maybe he escaped. And I'm going to tell you, I'm one of those people that says, I don't know if I believe the facts that he died in the bunker. You know, recent evidence shows that maybe the bones that they found were not of a man's. They were a woman's. So I don't know. But the fact remains, on April 30th, whatever happened to Hitler, it was done. And on May 7th, 1935, Germany surrenders. All right, so the war is finally over. Japan has surrendered, and so has Germany. So what did the war look like on the home front? You know, what did we deal with, right? So let's take a look. So women step in. All right. The attack on Pearl Harbor inspired a great amount of patriotism and high levels of enlistment in the military. The draft was in place for almost 40% of the new enlisted men are volunteers. Okay, so we had another draft just like World War I did, but a lot of people, because the attack was on our shores, they went ahead and enlisted. All right, between 1941 and 1942, the military grew from 1.4 million to 3 million. Massive. Men were not the only ones to join, though. Over 50,000 women enlisted as well. So from 1941, Women's Auxiliary Corps came to the 1942 Women Army Corps. So in 1941, there was the Auxiliary Corps, and in 1942, it morphed to the Women's Army Corps. So the women are joining the Army. Part of the regular Army with same benefits as men, so they're getting paid the same. They get medical care. Over 150,000 women volunteer. All right, we didn't just kind of sit on our butts. We joined. We were clerical workers, truck drivers, instructors, lab technician, anything that wasn't on the field in the back end, we volunteered to do. Over 600 women received medals for their service. All right, so not only did they participate, they were rewarded for it. And women also joined the Navy, Coast Guard, and the Armed Nurses Course. And then at home, industry all over the U.S. was converted to meet the nation's military needs. With so many men at war, the government started a campaign to encourage women to go to work. So this is very similar to what happened in World War I. We needed women to step in. Okay, so the image of a strong, determined female worker with her hair tucked under a kerchief graced countless magazines and posters. And her name was Rosie the Riveter. And she came from the 1942 song Rosie the Riveter. And we're going to listen to that one in class. She became a national symbol for an army of women who made artillery shells, sewed uniforms, and welded planes. All right, we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. So here's a quote from one of our women. All right, our war effort, it was a good success and a good thing we did it. It's a good thing that they showed the world that they can do things too. Oh, it's dirty work. Well, making a pie can be dirty work, right? So they're trying to say, well, you know, women don't like to get dirty, but they're like, hello, have you ever made a pie? It's not exactly clean, okay? Back then, they didn't have the store-bought pie crust. All right, so there were still obstacles for women entering the workforce. They were still paid less than men, and they faced hostility in the workforce. Guys, there's no OSHA laws. All right, your boss could still come behind you and grab your butt, and you can't do anything about it. Okay, women still made up more than 1/3 of the wartime workforce. The types of jobs for women's work changed as well. They were now worked in heavy industry and now continued to work after they got married. And in fact, 3/4 of the women got married. Okay, so in World War I, if a woman was pregnant or married, they didn't work. All right. In World War II, they're like, we really, really need you. We need to change some of these norms, right? So women also worked in white-collar jobs. Okay, so there's blue collar. Blue collar is your manual labor type jobs, your factory jobs. White collar is your desk jobs. All right, so the blue-collar jobs women expected to step aside when men returned. All right, and during the 1940s, women in clerical and secretarial work increased fivefold. All right, because those white-collar jobs, women could stay in when the men returned. Okay, with mom at work and dad at war, children's life changed a lot. The government spent $50 million building daycares. Most women prefer to leave them with neighbors or families, though. So even like today, not a lot of women are really big fans of daycare. We use daycare, but when there's an opportunity, we use family or friends to watch our kids. We benefited in several ways. Many earned a paycheck for the very first time, and women gained confidence that they could do the same jobs as men could do. All right, so finally women are looked at as more than, at least in the upper levels of society, because the lower class folks, you know, your poorer folks, they've been doing this for years. They've had to carry their own weight for a long time. And now you're starting to see your middle class woman going, you know what? I'm more than arm candy. I'm more than the mom that stays at home and raises the kids. I could do something. I could be worth something. And it's starting to become more socially acceptable. But there were changes for the African Americans too. So African American leaders hoped that the war would provide jobs for African Americans. So you learned in your previous flip video about the Tuskegee Airmen, all right? So and in war, they started to get some recognition, but here's at home, all right? Unfortunately, very few African American men had jobs. Out of 100,000 Americans working in the aircraft industry, only 250 of them were African American. African American leaders felt that there needed to be a double V campaign: victory over the fascists and victory over discrimination at home. All right, there needed to be a change at home. So Philip Randolph asserted African Americans would no longer accept a second-class citizenship. He presented President Roosevelt a list of demands, including the end of discriminatory practices and the government-funded work. So this guy, here's what he does that's unique. Okay, he gets to meet with the president, and he says, hey, we're not going to be accepting this second-class stuff. We're going to be requiring that you recognize us. So Roosevelt issues Executive Order 8802. All right, so this is some of your very first legislation that says that African Americans need to be treated better. Okay, so he wanted civil rights FDR wanted to put civil rights on the back burner, but Randolph was persistent. FDR's like, look, we've got a lot of other stuff going on. Okay, there's a war. We're just getting out of a depression. Civil rights, kind of not necessary. But Randolph was like, no, you're wrong. These rights are necessary and they need to be paid attention to. So even though FDR did not want a big civil rights thing going on, he really decided, maybe I need to be paying more attention. So under pressure, he issued Executive Order 8802. And what that did was assure fair hiring practices in any job funded with government money and established the Fair Employment Practice Committee to enforce these requirements. So now, if it's a government job, you need to be hiring fairly. You cannot discriminate on base of color. So even though racist practices were still common, by 1944, 2 million African Americans worked in defense industries. So for the first time, you're starting to see African Americans be able to step up and have jobs.